Hello and welcome. I just wanted to pop on for our new moon forecast. And this moon is an eclipse. So it's in Scorpio, and we've already been in the Taurus Scorpio eclipse axis for a little while. It started, in fact, last November with the Taurus eclipse. And so you can look back to that would have been a Taurus full moon and see how that went down for you. Then the last day of April, we would have had an eclipse, and 2 weeks after that, in early May, we would have had an eclipse in the Taurus Scorpio. The April one was Taurus, new moon. The next one was Scorpio, full moon. And now we're in Scorpio, new moon. The new moons are solar eclipses, and the full moons are lunar eclipses. And I find that easy to remember because full moons are obviously quite overt and memorable. So when there's a big full moon in the sky, that's a lunar eclipse. When you can't really see the moon because she's dark, then that's a solar eclipse. And we experience, for those of us who actually get to see them, because the eclipses are not as visible everywhere in the world, and they're also not they're not always total eclipses either. So sometimes you will see partial, sometimes you won't see it at all, but the energy of the eclipse is there nonetheless. So if you are able to see the eclipses, you can think how we experience a solar eclipse in the daytime, and we experience a lunar eclipse in the nighttime. So because eclipses come in seasons and they come in pairs, they work in an axis. And at the moment we're doing Taurus Scorpio. So this house, where the houses are here, don't stress about that because I've done it for my part of the world. So this is something, if you wanted to know the exact house system or house area, wherever you're living, you would have to do that separately. But we're just looking at this where the planets are within the signs. So this is the symbol, the glyph for Scorpio. It's like an M with a little spiky tail. And here's Taurus. It looks like a bull's head. And so because the nodes are here, and actually the nodes are not showing up on this chart right now, but the nodes are the nodes of the moon, and whatever sign pair they're in, we have a south and a north node. Whatever sign pair they are in is where we will experience eclipses in that eclipse season. So the node is currently at 13 Taurus, and we're going to be having our new moon. Here you can see sun and moon together in the sky at 2 degrees of Taurus, of Scorpio. And Venus is also completely enraptured in this new moon situation because she is also at 2 degrees. And she's actually been having her cazimi. She's been in the heart of the sun for the last few days by the time this happens, because she actually moves into Scorpio with the sun still within his heart. And this is quite a big deal. In fact, this eclipse and therefore this new moon is actually it's as Venus is forming one of her star points, which is quite a profound point in the Venus cycle. We're not going to get into that too much, but suffice to say that there is already a strong dynamic going on with Venus and the sun. And if you watch the full moon in Aries forecast that I did, there was this feeling of the moon on the other side of the circle, the wheel, from the sun and Venus. And she was feeling a little bit like she was missing out on some kind of secret that Venus and the sun were involved in. Strictly speaking, we kind of look at sun and moon as being a couple, a pair, and Mars and Venus as being a pair. But it was almost like the moon was feeling a little jealous of the relationship that sun and Venus were having at that time. And it was funny because when I looked at this chart, I remembered saying in that previous forecast that, the moon is wondering, or maybe I typed it in my shadow question, the moon is wondering if she should get in on the secret or just leave them to it. And now, 2 weeks later, the moon has joined them within the secret, and the three of them are, and remember, dark moon is a time sort of going inward. So the three of them are in the cave, and in fact, even more of a cave than one would expect, because Scorpio is also very cave-like. So the three of them are deep in the underworld of this journey that they're undertaking, of this transformative kind of phoenix-like process. And it's also an eclipse, which makes it that much more intense. And oftentimes we only actually see what eclipses were like sometime down the line, like at the most, it can be something really sudden, but sometimes we don't even recognize that until we get a little further from it. So I think this is going to be an interesting, it's a partial eclipse as well. It's not full. The lunar eclipse at full moon in Taurus is a total eclipse, and that one's going to be quite intense. It's also by the American elections, so let's watch that space. But I think for now, there is some kind of an alchemical process going on. And remember, Venus and the moon hold feminine energy and the sun holds masculine energy. So again, very rebalancing. There's a lot in relationship coming up. We've just done the whole Libra cycle, which always brings us to relationship. And then Scorpio brings us into kind of like resourcing, getting deeper into our resourcing within relationships. And going deeper, getting a little more intense, being prepared to get a little messy. And I think I can liken that to the honeymoon period in a new relationship, whether it's a new boss or whether it's a new romance or whatever the case may be. Early on, it's kind of like everybody's on their best behavior. And then as you get to know each other a little bit more, then it gets a little bit more intense. And you start to see shadow aspects of that person, and you start to they start to see yours, because after a certain amount of time, we can't just be our best selves. So, mosquito, the real aspects of us start to come through, and it gets deeper. And can you see me with my flaws? And am I prepared to be in relationship with you with your flaws? And really, we all have flaws. So if we say no to being in relationship with people because of their flaws, then we'll never really get very far within relationship. You've got to go a little deeper, because flaws are there for us all. So that is a very intense energy. And then, of course, in the other side of the planet here, or the sphere, we have Uranus in Taurus. It's not super close opposition. The next eclipse, when the moon gets round to Taurus, is going to be really, really, really activating this Uranus. But Uranus in Taurus has been like a problem. Maybe that's not the right thing to say. Not a problem, but it's been something we've been dealing with for some time. Uranus takes 7 years in a sign, and he's past halfway in his journey here. So we've been dealing with this Uranus and Taurus. It's uncomfortable. It's revolutionary. It's forced change. And Taurus is fixed. So Taurus doesn't really like change at the best of times. Now you bring the revolutionary lightning bolt in, and what can we do but change? But stubbornly and slowly, if it's in Taurus, right? So that is also still impacting the square. Here you can see Uranus and Saturn, and they're in a square, and that's the whole signature of 2021. And it's really even still the signature of 2022. And in some ways, it's like, I don't want to say post-pandemic, because, I think, well, let's say that. Let's just say it's the post-pandemic signature. If we look at the energy of the pandemic coming up, we had Pluto-Saturn conjunction in Capricorn. Pluto's still here. Saturn was here. Jupiter, who's now all the way over here, was here. That was all when we hit the COVID process, amongst other things. And we went through that. And then we've now got this signature, which is going, okay, so the whole world changed. We had that explosion, and probably we all had an implosion when we had the Capricorn conjunction. And now it's like, how are you going to change the old versus the new? And it's been going on this entire time, and it's still very, very tight and strong at the moment. It eased off for most of this year, but now this kind of time of year, the last few months, it's coming back to go, have you done the work? Have you changed? What are you keeping of the old? What are you letting go of? So that you can create this new world. So that's also a very powerful part of this eclipse, because eclipses are always going to be big and excessive and intense and revealing, even though this is a solar eclipse. So the revelations are often happening a little bit undercover, and because it's the darkness in the solar eclipse. and also in Scorpio, which is the South Node eclipse, and that is also the old karma. What are we letting go of? What are we changing? It's a big, big signature. We also have Mercury coming up pretty close here, and he's going to move not in the not too distant future, because he's now gone direct and he's moving pretty fast. So he's gonna join these planets in Scorpio within, I think it's about a week, maybe less actually. And then Mercury is forming this kind of happy conversation with Saturn. So he's kind of, it's almost like he's cajoling Saturn a little, going, yes, Saturn, we're prepared to do the work. We hear what you're saying to make a new world, because he's in the relational Libra. He's been quite diplomatic. And Saturn's also in an air sign. And then the other air sign energy we've got is Mars. And by the time we have this new moon, which is the 25th of October, we are 5 days away from Mars actually going retrograde in Gemini. However, he basically stopped at 25 degrees of Gemini. So when a planet is stationing to go retrograde, it slows right down. So Mars is in this like super slow, hanging out at 25 degrees for the entire like week before, and a little bit into. So it's really actually a good opportunity for us to drop in and feel what's going on in terms of how we want to get things done. Because this degree point, Mars is going to go retrograde. He's going to head far away from 25 degrees. But then on his return journey, when we get back here, there is something that's going to come more clear. So the discomfort of where Mars and Gemini is impacting you right now is going to come back when Mars comes back to this degree point. And even then, because this is all happening around these eclipses, and Mars actually stations between the two eclipses. So then you might get back to this point, and maybe when Mars gets back to this point, maybe that's your aha moment of, oh my gosh, I really get what the eclipses were doing for me in this last cycle. And doing for me is a good way to think about it. This is happening for me, not to me, because obviously when big things happen, we can take life really personally and feel like everything's happening to us and get a bit woe is me. And, I think sometimes it's healthy to have your pity party days or hour or whatever, but not to get stuck there, because actually there's this phenomenal grand design that none of us are able to understand. But it's definitely a design. It's just too big for us to grasp. But just to say that Mercury over here is also having a good conversation with Mars. So it's like Mercury is holding this conversation between the two challenging malefic planets, the two more challenging planets, and he's really trying to hold them in this diplomatic, balanced kind of way where he's going, yes, Mars, I get what you're saying. Okay, Saturn, I hear what you're saying. How can I get everybody to just be their best selves, and Libra is very diplomatic. And remember, of course, Libra is ruled by Venus. So Venus is in charge of what Mercury is doing here. So this is also very powerful. And Mercury is in charge of what Mars is doing here. And Mars is ruling the eclipse because Mars rules Scorpio. So you can see there's this very interlinked dynamic happening between Mars, Venus, Mercury. And it's kind of been something we've been experiencing already for a little while. And it's intensifying at this time in this eclipse portal, because the next eclipse, this eclipse is ruled by Mars. Then 2 weeks later, the full moon in Taurus is going to be ruled by Venus. And both Mars and Venus are at very big points in their own cycle. Mars is at a retrograde point, which means he's closest to the Earth, and Venus is furthest from the Earth forming a Venus star point. So there is this powerful dynamic in how moving into our new world that we're creating for ourselves and for each other, how do we do relating with people in a whole new way? And Taurus says, I want things to be light and breezy and pleasurable and fun. And Scorpio goes, and I want to get deep and dark and see what doesn't work. And if we can find a way to play between those two dynamics. I love working with opposite signs because they're the same and different. They have the same lessons showing up in different ways, and then on some levels they feel completely opposite. And as we begin to play within these dynamics of duality, which is so Mars and Venus in itself, we start to see, but it's not just duality. It's all 4 directions. It's up, it's down, it's in, it's out. it's so much broader than that, but we need to experience that polarizing kind of thing to recognize and always coming back to center. And if you just imagined yourself standing here in the middle and feeling all these things in all directions around you, but always being able to come back to middle, the eye, the center, the eye of the storm, the space where you can realign, maybe change a degree point or two, the direction that you're focusing, look at the sun, moon, and Venus and Mercury on one side, be present with what they're trying to show you. Another day, turn around and look at Saturn, ask him what he needs you to understand, and just slowly begin to recognize that you are such a multifaceted, nuanced, amazing, magical being, and you're here for a reason, and you chose this time. So it's happening for you, not to you, and the more able you are to be centered in yourself, and not every moment will you be centered in yourself, obviously, but the more you are able to come back to center, to down-regulate when things have gotten crazy, to breathe back into your body, to use whatever tools and techniques you have, the more easily you will be able to go with the flow of the change that is actually inevitable. And before I sign off, I would just like to remind you that I have a course on Udemy, and the link will be below this video, a course on moon phases made simple, and a free course as well on what's your moon sign. So if you're really interested in understanding a little bit more about how these moon cycles work and kind of working with them rather than unbeknownst working against them, then please do check that out. Also, like, follow, subscribe, and please share this on if you found it helpful. Thanks very much and have a beautiful day. Wait, I haven't stopped. Okay, goodbye.